What is up? Welcome back. In this series, we are covering third-party frameworks and packages in our SwiftUI apps. So far, we've covered two different image loading SDKs. Both of them are incredibly popular, really easy to implement as well. And in this video, we're going to look at the Keychain-Swift SDK. Also really easy to implement, but very, very different than image loading. This is for working with the keychain in iOS apps. So the keychain, I've talked about it a couple of times on this channel. It's a very popular iOS interview question. What is the keychain and why should we use it? You can think of the keychain in the same way that you think of user defaults, in that it's some file where we can persist small pieces of data. The main difference is that the keychain is encrypted, so it's better for storing secure things such as social security numbers, maybe telephone, maybe credit card numbers, things like that we actually want to encrypt. We want to keep those safe. And another cool thing about the keychain is that it actually persists on the user's keychain across their iOS devices. So if you've ever opened up one of your apps and you want to pull your password from the keychain, that's what we're talking about here. We can save passwords into the keychain, and then users can load them from the keychain on all of their different devices if they're using the same iCloud account. So in this video, we're gonna look at how to use this package, and we're gonna look at a couple of implementations of it. I think you guys are gonna find that working with this package with the keychain is very similar to working with user defaults or app storage. It literally is almost the same thing. We're gonna store small pieces of data using keys, just like we would store them in user defaults, except we're gonna put them in the keychain. So in this video, we're gonna learn how to use the package, how to implement it, and then we're gonna wrap up with some custom implementations, because I find that creating your own property wrappers can actually really help and make it really easy to work with this SDK in the same way that we would work with app storage for user defaults. All right, we are back in the Swiftful Thinking SPMs and SDKs project here. This is just a super simple project that I created for this playlist where we're playing around with a bunch of Swift packages. So far, we've done Kingfisher and SD Web Image. Those are both revolving around image loading. And now we're going to look at one that revolves around using the keychain. And there are a lot of SPMs that work with the keychain. We're only going to cover one right now, but I'm going to create a folder in case I decide to cover more in the future. So let's create a little group here called keychains. Sure. And inside that folder, let's right click, create a new file, a SwiftUI view. And let's call this one Keychain-Swift Bootcamp. Let's click create, open it up. And before we actually write some code, let's go in and let's talk about the keychain and let's look at this package. So I'm going to open up Google quick. Let's search for Keychain-Swift SPM. And it should pop right up. There's a bunch here. Keychain Access is pretty popular. I'm going to look at Keychain-Swift right now. They're doing basically the same thing. These are just simple packages that make it really easy to work with the keychain in Swift. Let's start with some quick notes here. Firstly, the keychain is similar to user defaults or app storage. So if you're familiar with SwiftUI, we have @app storage, which is a property wrapper for saving data into user defaults. We could also access user defaults directly, and user defaults is saving that data so it persists on the device. And it's great for small pieces of data, not entire databases. And keychain is working basically the same way. It's good for small pieces of data, and we're going to save it on the device, except keychain also has a couple extra superpowers. Firstly, keychain is encrypted. So for example, the keychain is good for things like passwords, social security numbers, credit card info, any sort of sensitive data is good to put in the keychain versus user defaults. So both of them are going to save the data locally, except the keychain is also encrypted. So it's better and it's safer for your users to put their sensitive information in the keychain. So immediately if you hear password, think keychain. Immediately if you think credit card info, keychain. Some people put like the user profile in the keychain. I've seen that before, but that can go either way in keychain or user defaults. The last thing I'm going to point out here is that the keychain persists between installs and across devices. So if the same user deletes your app and then reinstalls your app, the user defaults will be erased and start new, but the keychain is going to persist between installs. It's also going to persist across devices. So as soon as a user opens your app on a new device, anything in their iCloud keychain will automatically be there. So for example, Keychain is really good for passwords because you could imagine a user opens your app on the iPhone, they sign in with email and password, we save that password in the keychain. Now later, that user goes and downloads your app on iPad or Vision OS, and then when they go to type in their password, your app already has the password in the keychain. So even though they're on a new app, we already have the password, and that's a great user experience. So Keychain, similar to user defaults, except a little bit better because it is encrypted, and it's great for sensitive data, and it persists between installs. So Keychain is a little bit of a magic power. We should still use it sparingly. Don't put everything in the keychain, just important stuff that kind of fits this criteria. Let's jump back to the SDK that we're going to look in real quick, Keychain-Swift. And it's just basically helper functions for storing text in the keychain. And the syntax is actually very similar to user defaults. We're going to set a value for key, and we're going to give it a key. User defaults works the exact same way, setting a value for a key, getting a value for a key. We're going to import it as a Swift package. Go ahead and do that. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to copy the URL. Let's go back into our project. Let's come up to the navigator, go to the package dependencies, click the plus sign, paste in the package. Let's do, it says 21 to 22. That sounds good. Add package. Let it load real quick. Let's add the package to the target to make sure it's in our target. So it should be down here. Keychain-Swift. Let's go into our Keychain-Swift bootcamp and let's play around with this SPM. It's super easy to use, as you guys are going to see. Firstly, let's import Keychain-Swift. And let's look at the docs real quick. So the usage, import Keychain-Swift, we just did that. And we create an instance of Keychain-Swift. And then from there, we can get and we can set values. It works with strings, booleans, data, which is nice and convenient. We also have the ability to delete and clear. Let's get this working before we move forward. So I'm going to come back to my project here. And let's just say, let keychain equals Keychain-Swift, like it told us to do. Let's create an @state private var. Let's call this user password of type string equals a blank string. And let's make a very simple button here with title. Title is going to say, if the user password is empty, so if this is a blank string, let's put no password. Otherwise, let's put in the user password. And then we'll have an action here. So right now it should say no password. So what we're going to do is basically on up here, we're going to load the data from the keychain. And then when we click the button, we're going to save the data to the keychain. So here we'll say on up here, and let's just call keychain dot, let's say get and value for key. Let's call this user password. I'm going to use an underscore here. I like doing that when we have keys. And that value should give us a string. So we'll set user password equal to the result of this. Looks like this is optional. So otherwise we'll give it a default of blank string. This loads. Obviously nothing happens here. When we click this button, let's save it. We'll say keychain.set value. Value is going to be, let's put in a fake password. Say ABC123 exclamation. For key, let's use the same key here. Pass that in. So if I click this button, it should save. And now when I restart the app on up here, it should load in. Perfect. I can also just tweak this a little bit. Let's also set, let's say let new password equals ABCDEF123. We'll put the new password here, and then we'll say user password equals new password. All right, so my UI works now. If I click this, we update the new password to DEF123. That is actually the whole gist of using the keychain. Very simply, you create a keychain, you set a value, and then you get a value. I believe we can also create multiple instances of this. We don't need to share it. So for example, I can call here Keychain.Swift like that. And I can also put one here. Let's make sure it works with going back to ABC. ABC, and if I reappear the app, ABC, cool. So Keychain.Swift makes it super convenient for saving data to the keychain. Let's go back to the package real quick. Use with access parameter to specify the security level of the keychain storage. By default, accessible when unlocked is used. It is one of the most restrictive options. Accessible after first unlock if you need your app to access the keychain while in the background. And note that it is less secure. So I've never used this before, but it seems really easy to implement. We just add the with access. So when we set this, we'll do .with access and accessible after first unlock this device only, accessible when unlocked this device only. I've really never used these before, but obviously super handy. I'm going to comment that out and just leave it here. Scroll down here. Synchronizing keychain items with other devices. Set synchronizable property to true to enable keychain item synchronization across multiple user devices. Setting synchronizable property to true will add the item to other devices with the set method. So it looks like if we set it to synchronizable true and then we set, it's going to synchronize across devices. So we'll just say here, let keychain equals this, keychain.synchronizable equals true, and then keychain.set password. All right, coming down here because I want to make this video quick. Sharing keychain items with other apps. I've also never really done this. It looks like you just need to create a group. This is probably if you're sharing a lot of data between apps. Generally, I'm just using passwords and simple things like that. There's some other customization here that I'm not really going to get into because I've never really used it before. Probably an edge case for most apps. Let's make sure we have code here for deleting. So if instead we wanted to delete something, we would call keychain.delete or keychain.clear. Super convenient, very, very easy to use to work with the keychain. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we might actually use this in a production SwiftUI app. So firstly, the Keychain.Swift, depending on how you're going to use it, this could be a global variable or this could be a singleton or something like that. So we could create a final class called Keychain Manager and open the brackets. And then in here, we'll create a keychain. We'll say, let keychain of type Keychain-Swift. And then we'll create an initializer here. And then in the initializer, we'll just set keychain equal to keychain.swift, and we can set the synchronizable to true. And then we'll set self.keychain equal to the keychain. So super easy way to create some sort of manager. So in practice, I have seen people do this, where they just create a keychain manager in the view. I've seen people use singletons here. This is a very common place to use singletons. Generally, you're only going to create one keychain for your whole app. Some apps might create multiple instances with different groups, but most apps probably just have one. I've seen other people put this in the environment. So for example, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to open up ChatGPT here. And I'm just going to say, paste this in, and I'm going to say, create an environment key for this class so that I can call, and I'm going to type out what I actually want it to be. I want it to be at environment, and I want to pass in the \keychain var keychain. And I'm going to go back to ChatGPT and say, paste this in. I can call this from my SwiftUI view. Let's see if this works here. Define an environment key. That's the first step to doing this. Keychain manager. Let's copy this code, jump back into our code here, paste it here. Keychain manager key we haven't made yet. Let's come back to ChatGPT. Here's the key. Back to ChatGPT. And it looks like they called it keychain manager actually. So let's come back here and let's change this to keychain. Cool. Now I can delete this version here. I'll comment it out and we'll access the keychain and we'll say keychain, it's .keychain because we don't actually have the methods in there. Maybe we'll add a method quick. Let's just say func set. We'll say keychain
set. Let's do value string for key, type string, and we'll paste this in here. It's just like a wrapper for that for accessing that function. We'll say get, and we'll say keychain.get. Value should return us a string for key. Pass in the key here. We'll make this then private. And now we can access these functions from our view, nice and easy. We'll call here keychain.set new password for key. Comment this out. And then here we're going to say user password equals keychain.get user password, otherwise a blank string. Let's test it out again. Let's change the password, make sure it works. All right, I'm gonna let the preview load. I'm gonna click it. Looks like it should have set. Now let's reload the simulator quick. And on appear, it loaded from the keychain. Perfect. So this is another way that we could actually use this in our SwiftUI apps. We put it into the environment. The last way I'm going to show you guys before we wrap up here is actually, if you followed me in the SwiftUI Advanced Bootcamp, which I know some of you guys have not yet watched yet. I know that because I can look at the number of views and not a lot of people are getting to the advanced stuff. But if you were with me in the Advanced Bootcamp, I did a bunch of videos on creating custom property wrappers. I don't have time to explain that in this video. I highly recommend watching those in that advanced series. But one of the things we did in that series was create a file manager property wrapper. So it was just a quick property wrapper for getting and fetching from the file manager. And what I'm going to do is actually copy that property wrapper. And I'm going to come back into my new project here, and I'm going to paste in this property wrapper. And just like we have at app storage, I'm going to call this one at keychain storage. And let's just customize this a little bit. So keychain storage is a dynamic property with at property wrapper labeling. Let's call this the title. Let's call this new value because it's not actually a title, and then a key, and then the same key here. When we get the wrapped value, we'll access the new value. And non-mutating set wrapped value is going to get the new value. And then when we set it, we're going to save a new value. The projected value is just a binding version of the string, which is the same code that we have here. If you don't understand this, you can just copy it or go watch the property wrappers videos when you get to them. And then we have our initializer for the property wrapper. So here's where we want to actually load it. So what I'm going to do here is actually create in here. We'll say let keychain equals keychain manager. Let's create an instance real quick. And then we're just going to set the new value equal to keychain.get for key. And we're going to pass in the key. We'll say otherwise blank string. And then I'll print out success read. And then it does not throw an error. So let's just get rid of the do catch and then save keychain manager. Let's actually set the keychain inside this property wrapper so we can reuse it. We'll say let keychain of type keychain manager. We'll set self.keychain equals to the keychain. And then down here, we're going to very simply set, when we save it, we will first save to the keychain. So we'll say keychain.set new value for the key. And then we're going to set the self.new value equal to the new value we're passing in here. And I'm just going to print out success saved. And so with that little bit of line of code, we should also be able to come down here. Instead of using an environment, we could do an at keychain storage. We can pass in a key. Let's call this user password. Make it a variable called user password of type string. And I'm going to comment this one out. Let's give this a wrapped value of a blank string. So that's the starting value. And then I'm going to actually just comment out this. And in my project here, I'm just going to set the user password equal to the new password. Comment this out. And here, we actually don't need to call on appear anymore because it's going to happen in my property wrapper. Let's see if this works. Let's just change the password to AAA. Click it, AAA. And if I reload it, it should start as AAA. Awesome. So now we have a keychain storage property wrapper. We walked through a bunch of use cases of how to use the keychain in our app. I love this property wrapper version, but I've seen the environment very often, and I've seen people just create an instance somewhere in the code base. I would say generally, if you're going to work with it in the view layer, the property wrapper is obviously super convenient for doing that, or the at environment. If you're going to use the keychain off of the view layer, so in somewhere like a view model or deeper than that, well, then maybe you don't want to use this SwiftUI stuff and you want to just stick with the basics, create a manager class or a singleton somewhere. That's it for the keychain. Super powerful. You probably are going to need to use this in most apps you create. I highly recommend it. It is essentially the same as user defaults, except encrypted, and it persists between installs, which is very convenient for us as developers. Thank you guys for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking. In the next video, I got something special for you guys, so I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.